Have you ever wanted to be the next Michael Cole, the next Jim Ross, the next Mike Adamle, the next Kevin Patrick? Of course you do. Everyone wants to be Kevin Patrick. He's jacked, and putting national bias aside for a minute, he's the greatest of all time. This is a walkthrough tutorial on how to be a pro wrestling commentator, what it's like, what you might need to know, what you need to do, how to deal with the promoter being convicted for armed robbery and choosing trial by combat despite not being sentenced to death, and he nominates you to a fight on his behalf but your opponent's Ezekiel Jackson. Just little tips and things like that. Getting started. I've been asked many times, once, how did I get into commentary? How did I get started? What I'm about to tell you now is one of the most groundbreaking, top secret revelations for anyone who has ever wanted to break into the wrestling industry, and I can't believe I'm giving this information away for free. But if you want to get started as a commentator in wrestling, what you have to do is ask. Just ask. It literally is that simple. Wrestling promotions come and go every 30 seconds. Just ask your local indie promoter. Something will pop up eventually. But one thing you may be asked to do is an audition tape of sorts. This is where you'll convince yourself in 10 minutes or less that you are the shittest person to ever sit within a 500-mile radius of a microphone. This is where you'll commentate over any match of your choice and send the end product to the promoter. I chose Jordan Grace versus Dash Chizako, which is an interesting choice considering that I didn't know who Dash Chizako was. But if you fast forward a few years, I don't know who Dash Chizako is. There's also commentary on the match already, so I just had to mute it and send it off in silence without any crowd noise. Once you've finished embarrassing yourself and the promoter says yes for some reason, then we move on to our next stage, meeting everybody. The first thing you'll notice when you show up to work on a wrestling show is the amount of handshaking. This is both moldy as fuck, but also very important as it gives you a good opportunity to establish your dominance, and that's what this is all about. You need to go up to every single person you see and vice grip their fucking hand. Try break every single bone in their fucking hand. Rip their hand clean off if possible. It's just a respect thing. Kind of a good way to say hi. The second thing you'll notice is that wrestling isn't real. Most wrestlers are hanging around planning their matches. The appropriate thing to do in this situation is interrupt them and tell them what to do. It shows great initiative. It lets them know you know what you're talking about. Some suggestions I recommend would be to tell them to do a 630 splash, even if they've never done one before, because the fans will pop big for it. A 630 splash, where they do more rotations than is physically possible before landing. That'd get a good reaction from the fans as well. Or better yet, instead of a 450, a 360, where you flip before landing full force, feet first into your opponent's ribs. That'd get a good reaction too. If you see the promoter again, make suggestions. I think the main event should be a first blood match. Better yet, I think it should be a last blood match, where the wrestlers have to whack themselves off ring posts and random objects around the venue until they bleed, and the first one to do so wins. It shows you're enthusiastic, it shows you're switched on, and it shows you know what you're talking about. Equipment. Usually the equipment will be given to you if there's a film crew recording it. Sometimes you might be responsible for your own equipment if commentary is recorded separately or whatever. So here's my equipment that I recommend. First of all, you need a laptop and a charger, obviously. I recommend plugging out something else to charge your laptop. The wrestlers don't need their music, their lights, or their entrance video to put on a good show, but you need to use your laptop, so plug all their shit out, they won't mind. I also recommend a Hot Wheels themed laptop so that everyone there knows you're really cool without you actually having to mention it. I also recommend an Xbox 360 headset. It's captured some of the most iconic audio of all time. So it's clearly good enough for your audio as well. Making your entrance. Depending on the setup of the show, you might have to make an entrance. My theme song as of my last entrance was Let Me Entertain You by Robbie Williams, except it was sung by the promoter. And it was a fucking banger. I hate making entrances, I'll be honest. I hate walking into a room and seeing 100 people staring at me. The first time I had to make an entrance, I remember not being able to find the gap to get through the curtain. I didn't even know this is a thing. I got lost in a curtain. It probably only lasted about 5 seconds, but it felt like about 7 years. I felt as though when I finally get to the curtain, the fans will have left, the ring will be taken apart, the promoter will be in floods of tears, and the show will be cancelled, all because I couldn't walk through a fucking curtain like a normal, living, breathing human. Anyway, you go down, you take your seat, and I'm telling you now, especially if it's an 18 show where there's a bit of atmosphere, this show may be in front of a few hundred fans in an abandoned cinema or a community center or a bingo hall. This will feel like Wrestle fucking Mania to you, right? This will feel like you are being broadcasted to millions of people live on RTE News with fucking Ann Doyle and the crew. It leads me to my next point. Shut the fuck up. I'm not joking. This is genuine advice. I used to talk myself into circles because I was so high. I was so hyped up commentating my first show. I thought I had to make great points 100% of the time, or I was doing a bad job, right? So I'd be like, that's why Terry Thatcher can win. He's athletic, he's agile, he's athletic. Slow down. Give yourself time to think before you speak, and don't be afraid of silences. Silences are good. Maybe not for the full show, but fans hearing you, this is fucking rotten. When fans in the venue hear you commentate, sometimes you'll be on your own on a balcony, sometimes you'll be in a corner, and the second you speak, people will turn around and stare at you for a minute. The last show I commentated down in Cork, I was literally sitting in the audience because there wasn't any room to sit anywhere else. They were cool though. One time, someone I know commentated this match up in, I think, Belfast, and it was a quiet show. And there's nothing worse when you're commentating in a quiet venue and the entire room can hear your voice. This person was commentating when all of a sudden he goes, "Spear!" And one of the very few fans in attendance turns around and goes, I know, we saw it. I just want you to know that if this ever happened to me, you would never see me again. What to do when it all goes wrong? You may have heard the phrase, didn't quite get all of it. This is the greatest phrase in all of pro wrestling commentary. Does it cover anything? Does it help anyone? No, it just draws attention to the fuck up that one of the wrestlers just did. But that makes it hilarious. I absolutely love that phrase. In fact, I'd even use it if nobody did anything wrong. You know, if I was commentating fucking Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels in a 70-star classic, I'd still find a way to squeeze that line in somewhere, just because it's funny. Injuries are another thing that can go wrong in a match, and my advice really would just be to learn the names of different bones and shit, because I remember one time I was commentating a main event, right? And it was a big fucking deal because this match happened in Limerick. And in Limerick, if John Cena comes out, dead reaction. Steve Austin, don't care. The Rock, don't know who that is. Steve Savage, fireworks, confetti, men, women, children running through the streets, tears of joy streaming down their faces. This man was the fucking hometown hero. But the story going into this match was that he tore his meniscus. For real, he did. And he was going to wrestle through it so he could get his revenge and win the match. There was one slight problem though. I didn't know what a meniscus was. Literally no clue. Was it his head? Was it his back? Was it his arms? I just... Does he have one meniscus? Does he have several? Does he have a spare one that he can use for emergencies? Should I be complimenting the strength of his opponent's meniscus, or is that weird? He'd get slammed and I'd be like, oh damn, right on the meniscus. Ultimately, it was his leg, and I kind of guessed that based off how the match went. But still, good to know these things. Acting. This is a surprisingly big part of pro wrestling commentary. The biggest example I can remember of this was one of the first few shows I ever did. Again, it was in Limerick, but this time there was a local celebrity in the front row, a boxer. And they did this thing where he got physical with a wrestler after the main event, and I was told before the show began, pretend this is a shoot. Pretend this is real. Pretend that this boxer legitimately hopped in and punched one of the wrestlers. And it was in this moment I realised two things. First of all, my acting is terrible. Secondly, I don't remember this boxer's name. So I was just like, oh no, it's him. I think I remembered his first name, which is Graham. And I was like, oh, it's Graham. Like he's just Graham from the pub and not some boxer that can batter people. But yeah, my advice is just don't do that. Genuinely hating a wrestler. Sometimes you'll have to commentate someone's match and you might not like that person very much. You might find them irritating, you might find them annoying. Whatever the reason is, it's always important to put your personal animosity aside and just be a professional for the duration of the show. Researching. This is another very important part of the job. If you ever see a commentator with sheets of paper in front of them, there's probably different drawings of various different wrestlers on the show. That's what I do anyway. I assume that's what all the other commentators do. I don't really know what else you do with a pen and paper, but in terms of research, when the promotion you work for books a big name, a big import that you've never heard of, Cage Match is your best friend. Just type their name into that and pretend you know what you're talking about. The best wrestlers to commentate on from this perspective would be trainees and people that you can't research because they're not on Cage Match. So you can just make up whatever shit you want about them. I remember one wrestler I commentated on had experience wrestling out in Dubai. And when I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, he fucking battered everyone when he was in Dubai. He was the Dubai champion. He was royalty, the UAE GOAT. Are you going to verify that? Are you going to watch Emirati wrestling to prove me wrong? You will in your shite. So really, you can just say whatever you want in that sort of situation. I'd also recommend researching when a wrestler hits a move and you don't know what it is. I'll typically Google, what is that move where a wrestler slams other wrestler on back after picking him up at an angle. And it usually tells you exactly what it is. Avoiding spoilers. So one thing you'll commonly find on these shows is just before doors open and fans come in, the promoter will gather everyone around and spoil the card on everyone. Spoiling what match is happening when, how long it's going to be, what the results are. Absolute shite. I recommend shouting spoilers at the promoter in an attempt to get them to shut up. The dream. So, apparently, this is quite a common occurrence for wrestlers. They'll have a dream where their music will hit and they're backstage, not even in their gear yet. And I don't know if this is just a me thing. It very well could be. But I get that similar type of dream when it comes to commentary. One dream I have a lot is when I'm commentating on a show and all of a sudden I completely forget how to speak. I had a dream where I did a show in Belfast, but I didn't know who anybody was. And I commentated the whole show without using anyone's name. And it was fucking terrible. I had a dream that I was commentating a show in the water and we were all floating on platforms, but every time I laughed, the platform tipped over, so people were begging me not to stop people were begging me to stop laughing, but I couldn't, and I drowned the camera crew. And I had one nightmare where Ryback came to Fight Factory and my microphone wasn't working, and they kept stopping and pausing the match until my microphone started working, but it never worked, so the show got cancelled. My final tip though is dealing with criticism. Just cry.